All right, let's go through Matthew chapter 16. So it says, one day the Pharisees and Sadducees came to test Jesus, demanding that he show them a miraculous sign from heaven to prove his authority. So again, answering the question, who really is Jesus? Now we've got the religious Jewish leaders asking this question. And Jesus, by the way, he says, only an evil, adulterous generation would demand a sign like this, but the only sign I'm going to give them is the sign of the prophet Jonah. Of course, he's referring to Jonah in the belly of the fish for 3 days, and using it as a metaphor or as an allegory for what Jesus himself is going to do when he goes to the cross and he dies on the cross, and in 3 days later he comes back from the dead. And so this is what he means by this. Of course, they don't know that this is what he means by this, but that's what he was talking about when he's talking about the sign of Jonah. Then he turns to the crowd and he says, watch out for the yeast, which means, again, it's another metaphor, but he's talking about the false teachings of the Pharisees and Sadducees. And then we transition here to Peter's declaration about Jesus. In verse 13, Jesus came to the region, and we see kind of a little bit of a shift. Now he's turning to his disciples, and he's teaching the 12. He says, who do people say that I am? Okay, the Son of Man is another term for Jesus. Who do people say that I am? They said, well, some people say John the Baptist, some say Elijah. And he says, but no, listen, I'm asking you, who do you say I am? And it's such a great question. Really, this is a question everyone has to answer for themselves. The most important question you could answer for yourself is, who do you think Jesus is? And Peter got it right. Peter said, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus says, yes, that's right. You had the right answer. But then he warns them in verse 20 not to tell anyone that he's the Messiah. But look at what it says in verse 21. It says, from then on, Jesus began to tell his disciples plainly that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem, that he would suffer many terrible things at the hands of the elders, the priests, and the teachers of the law, that he would be killed, and on the third day he would be raised from the dead. Now, the reason I highlighted this is because this did not at all go along with the disciples' expectation for the Messiah. See, when they said, you're the Messiah, when Peter said that earlier, right up above, you're the Messiah, what Peter meant by that was, you're going to save the nation of Israel from the Romans. You're going to be this sort of warrior king. And then the next thing we see in the passage is Jesus, now he begins to reveal to them what it actually means in God's terminology, in God's plan, what the Messiah actually means. And it doesn't mean that he's going to be this great warrior king leading them, the Israelites, to victory over the Romans, but instead it means that he would be killed and would have to be raised from the dead, the sign of Jonah. And so, again, it doesn't match their expectations. Peter takes him aside. He says, no, this should never happen to you. Jesus then, right after having affirmed Peter in his faith, Jesus now is, saying, get away from me, Satan, because you're only looking at things from a human point of view. And so then he turns to his disciples, and this is a great passage to read here at the end of this chapter. And he uses this famous speech about, if you're going to follow me, you've got to take up your cross and follow me. It might not be what you expect. Following the God of the Bible, following Jesus, might not match your expectations, but are you still willing to follow him? And that's the question he ends with here at the end. So go ahead and read Matthew chapter 16 for yourself. We'll see you tomorrow for chapter 17.